So, if you're anything like me, Stella Sora might have flown under your radar underneath the hype of other games releasing this month like Blue Protocol, Chaos Zero Nightmare, and Duet Night Abyss. And once I looked into it, I was stoked to find out it's another roguelite gacha game, and honestly, if that's the new trend over open world games, I'm low-key kinda here for it. I'll be honest, I don't really want to explore Space China again for the 5th time. So I put in a lot of time into the game since its release to get an idea on the good, the bad, and the ugly that it offers, so that you can have an idea if it's even worth your time. Now, I typically like to start with the good over the ugly. However, with the recent discourse on Yostar's monetization for their game, it'd be incredibly tone-deaf to not talk about the ugly of their monetization first. So for me, and I'm sure many others, the ugly of Stella Sora is how their developer, Yostar, known for being the global publisher for games like Arknights and Azure Lane, switched up how their gacha system itself works pretty drastically from their last closed beta without really telling anyone before the official launch. Now, getting nickel and dimed from a gacha game developer is like walking onto a highway and being surprised to see cars. Yeah, some of them may technically be nicer to drive or prettier to look at, but they're also going to run you over if you play dumb. Yostar is currently giving off the impression that they think their player base is dumb, which is tragic because I honestly really like the core gameplay loop of Stella Sora, but I'll get to that in a bit. So, the gacha. Now, at this point there's so many gacha system breakdowns that I'm actually going to assume you know the gist of how it works. But if you don't, or you want a more in-depth breakdown, the Mather and Meiji released a video that goes pretty in-depth that I'll have a link to down in the description below. What I will say on the monetization matter is that it's such a bad look to change the monetization like this without any kind of announcement behind the intention. That communication piece is everything for a player base. Acknowledgement of the situation is good, but in order to build goodwill or even trust from a player base, you gotta make your intentions clear, and it doesn't really feel like that part has happened yet. Furthermore, like many people have pointed out, the repeatable currency income also doesn't seem to match the price change for pulls at the moment. However, I will say if they continue to hold events like the upcoming one, where they just dump a bunch of pull currency, that could provide more balance to the overall pull income, but unfortunately that's the kind of thing that only time will tell. And that's the ugly of Stella Sora. Again, I wanted to start with that since I know that's been the main topic of discussion for the game so far. I also get it and completely understand if it's been enough to turn you away from the game. To be frank, there are so many options out there that exist and are also continuing to come out. However, I do feel like what this game does do, it does well. So now let's talk about the good of Stella Sora. Now, switching gears, I did honestly have a good time with Stella Sora's gameplay loop, charming aesthetic, and surprisingly solid soundtrack. You have this game mode called Ascension, which is where the core roguelike gameplay takes place. You'll set up a team of 3 units to climb a tower called the Monolith, with your goal in team building being to set up an ideally mono-element team that synergizes their abilities and buffs. You control one of those 3 characters, while the other 2 are designated as supports that you can call on to perform a support skill or an ultimate skill. The combat experience in this is this top-down action gameplay that's like this love child of Hades and Vampire Survivor. As you climb the Monolith, you'll make your way through combat encounters, random event encounters, shops, and boss floors to receive power-ups for your characters that can synergize into builds that drastically improve their performance in combat. Furthermore, to help streamline the fact that you'll be building 3 characters up per run, is that the game will highlight which upgrade options synergize with each other, so you can just enjoy blasting monsters while jamming to the stellar, no pun intended, soundtrack. Then, once you complete a run, all the power-ups that you've accumulated for your characters are stored in a record that you can then use to take on the game's various other game modes like time trials, boss rushes, and a second roguelite mode. If you joined the hype train on Uma Musume a couple months back, it's like building up your horse girl in career mode to use in team trials. Or, if you've been playing Chaos Zero Nightmare since this video isn't out before then, it's like using your save data. Now, it might sound odd, but this almost feels like a cozy gamer's version of a roguelite. Personally, it's nice to have a game that's just got this cute charm, endearing characters, engaging story, and generally more relaxed but still addictive gameplay loop. It's not for everyone, but if that kind of thing appeals to you, what's here honestly isn't bad. Furthermore, like I mentioned, I really have been enjoying the music. It mostly leans into the upbeat side of things, but honestly, it matches the aesthetic and vibe of the story and world. So for me, it really brings everything together. I also appreciate that the discs, or weapons, function like actual music tracks. They have these unique songs attached to them that exemplify the kind of memory that the character featured on it lost. And if you found what you really like, You can even set it as your main menu theme, assuming you pulled it. I know. One step forward, one step back. Now onto the bad, or maybe it'd be more appropriate to call this the annoying. Nah, that's not as catchy. Anyways, to start, building up characters takes so many resources, but the return you get from spending your daily stamina to farm for those resources feels pretty low. In typical gacha fashion, you'll get flooded with resources at the start, but once those are used up, it can become a pain building up multiple teams to either try out different builds or progress further in game modes that require multiple teams. That being said, it's not a make or break for me personally, but it is a pain point worth mentioning. Another thing to note is that while I thoroughly enjoyed the voice acting, it's not consistently there. Characters' side stories don't include voice acting outside of specific instances, which hurts when the rest of the visual novel presentation is solid. So it's noticeable when all of a sudden there's just no more voice acting. Lastly, story enjoyment is a bit more subjective, but I personally found it to be pretty endearing, interesting, and overall enjoyable. It's done through this cute and endearing visual novel setup that I honestly had a good time with. Now you might be asking why this would be considered bad, and it's because the story itself is so short. Currently, there's only 2 main chapters released, so it feels like a missed opportunity to have such little main story on release when the storytelling that's there is so solid and provides more buy-in to the world of Stella Sora. You're following this ragtag group of adventurers trying to overthrow these greedy and power-hungry corporations bent on exploiting others. Wait a minute. Yostar, you can't just write yourself into your own game like that. Thanks so much for watching my breakdown on the pros and cons that Stella Sora has to offer. I'm planning on covering all the other games coming out soon in a similar fashion, so if you enjoyed this one, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next ones. Let me know what games you're most excited about that are coming up down in the comments, and most importantly, have a blessed day.